Hi, welcome to another edition of Ask Andrew. Each week I answer a couple of film-related questions that were submitted via our website. If you have a film-related question you'd like me to give a shot at answering, please submit it. Go to the Film Studies Online section of brynmarfilm.org and use the Ask Andrew form. Now, on to our first question. Gabby asks, what do you believe led to the drop of popularity in movie musicals of the Golden Age? Well, I think there's a couple of factors that had to do with this. I think one of them was the changes in culture and the changes in the film-going audience. I think the culture got more cynical after the 1950s and into the 60s and 70s. I think the counterculture began to arise, and they were not interested in anything that had to do with previous generations or traditional modes of morality or the way things had been done. I think when most of us think of Golden Age Hollywood musicals, we think of relatively positive, upbeat, wholesome affairs that have a sort of innocence about them or an idealism about them. Some would say naivete about them. And I think those sorts of things just didn't play in the 60s and 70s and beyond. Likewise, I think the movie-going audience changed. I think the audience began to skew younger, and it would skew younger for decades. And I think, all different sorts of people go to the movies, but the ones that the studios were going after skewed younger. And I think, and it also skewed male. And younger males are a demographic group that is traditionally not interested in musicals on stage or screen. So I think that's part of it as well. Finally, I would say the industry kind of wore out musicals at the end of the 1960s. They had some big successes in the middle of the 1960s, movies like The Sound of Music, and they thought that they could sort of repeat that formula kind of ad nauseum and continue to have tremendous success. The problem was they kept feeling the need to up the stakes each time, and so each successive production was bigger and more lavish and more expensive. So you have, by the end of the 1960s, big flops like Hello, Dolly or Star, ! With Julie Andrews, and that sort of wore out the audiences for musicals for a while, and it wore out the studio's desire to make them for a while. When musicals do start to come back, and you do have some in the 70s, you have Grease, you have Godspell, you have Hair, they are very clearly sort of either counterculture musicals, like the latter few, or they're kind of a bit sort of cynical, looking back at nostalgia with a sort of skewed eye like Grease. And moving forward, you really have sort of limited musicals that are offered or are successful. So I think those factors sort of combine to kind of make the movie-going audience anyway tend not to be the most receptive to musicals. There are exceptions, of course. Chicago, which came out I think right in 2000 or right around there, was enormously successful both critically and commercially. So there are ways to do it, and there are some that are successful. And of course, animation has a lot of musicals that are made in that format, and many of them are extremely successful. So they still can hit, and Hollywood still makes them. It's just not as sort of widespread of an endeavor as it had been during the Golden Age. Thanks for the question. For our next question, Judy asks, I was wondering, aside from Chinatown, which, as you've noted, fulfills most of the criteria for film noir, what relatively recent films fall into that genre? I think that Body Heat is one. Can you suggest others? Is the femme fatale a thing of the past? Well, Judy, this is a great question, and it is the ongoing debate about film noir, whether it was indeed a cycle, which meant it sort of had a historical contingency or a sort of cultural duration or lifespan, and whether it's a genre, which would mean that it can be made at any time and is sort of always a type of story worth telling. There are some more recent examples than just the ones you mentioned. Certainly there are John Dahl's films of the early 90s, Red Rock West and The Last Seduction. There is Brick from 2005, which is a really interesting movie. It's sort of a classic film noir set in a modern day Southern California high school. It's a very divisive film, but one that I really like. And then if you want to kind of go outside the box, I think Who Framed Roger Rabbit is certainly checks a lot of the boxes, as they say, about film noir. Your question continued with, are femme fatales a thing of the past? And I think certainly you have touched on one of the issues with film noir maintaining its relevance, which has to do with gender roles and the changes in gender roles and how those are perceived and how they have sort of permeated society. I don't think it's so much that all issues about gender and the differences between men and women and the conflicts that arise from those differences have been resolved or no longer matter. I think it may be the case of something like the Western, where those conflicts that genre addressed tended to move to police and crime movies in the 70s and beyond. Perhaps film noir and its issues about gender and, female sexuality and male, corruption, weakness, and stupidity, maybe those have gone somewhere else. But the genre still is made. I also forgot the Coen brothers, The Man Who Wasn't There, from the early 2000s. So there are some such movies, but they are fewer and far between. And I think the cultural changes are certainly part of them. I also think that the movie's highly stylized. And if you look at a film, or the genre is highly stylized, I should say. And if you look at a film like Brick that really embraces it with both hands, you'll see that it can have, have a bit of a distancing effect to it. So I think those are some of the reasons why we don't see as many films noir as we used to. And it's unfortunate on the one hand, but on the other hand, it lets that debate between whether it's a genre or cycle rage on, which I don't mind having that conversation anytime. Thanks for your question. And thank you for watching this edition of Ask Andrew. Every Tuesday, I answer a couple of film-related questions that were sent in via our website. If you have film-related questions you'd like to see me try to answer, please visit the Ask Andrew form on the Film Studies Online section of brynmarfilm.org. We appreciate your interest in what we're doing during our temporary closure due to the pandemic. And if you want to support Bryn Mawr Film Institute while we're closed, we would very happily accept your support via donation through our website. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.